one of the reasons most of us have not really been taught nor experienced the fullness of our heart is that fear we describe, but the fear of feeling, which sounds crazy, but we've only really been taught to revere or appreciate the kind of happy, positive feelings, right? Or the ones that are kind of publicly okay to show, right? The ones that, whereas things like fear, anxiety, loneliness, sadness, all these things that we all deal with, it's like, oh no, we put on a face, I'm fine, I've got this. Newsflash, nobody's got this. Clearly, look at what just happened, what we're going through, and we're all just doing the best we can. But the beauty is the power of the heart can restore us and remind us who we are and connect us with each other by letting ourselves feel.
The first and best victory is to conquer self. Welcome to the Conqueror approach, a journey of self-mastery. To cultivate our mind, body, spirit, financial literacy, and allow our light to shine upon the world. Brought to you by me, your host, U.S. Navy submarine veteran and entrepreneur, Musa Mikkel. Let's conquer. Welcome back to the Conqueror approach. Today I have Jessie May Wolfe, the founder of the global movement, the HeartRise Movement. Jessie May empowers teams of creatives, entrepreneurs, executives around the world using the integration of the HeartRise Method. Each program results in increased emotional intelligence, strategic problem solving, corporate communication, and leadership development. She's helped cities globally sharing this method. And she's also the host of the High on Heart podcast. Thank you, Jessie May, for joining me. It's such an honor.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And what you do is kind of one of the most important, workspaces I've witnessed, because it's bringing people back to understanding where their true essence is. And before we dive into heart and operating from that place, can you tell us a little bit about the HeartRise movement, how it was born, and what does HeartRise mean for people who may have not heard it before?
Absolutely. Yes. Well, it's definitely been the sort of my heartbeat the whole way along, and it's my life's work. So HeartRise, RISE stands for Radiant Integral Soul Energy. So it's essentially, if you think of it as the currency that connects us, it's the heart intelligence. And there is a lot of science to it, if that sounds a little too woo-woo. It's the power and the presence and the pulse. It's the energy or the vibes that you experience when you meet someone that no one's really taught us how to harness. And the heart is the way in and the way through. And when you learn how to cultivate that, it's amazing what it can do. So we'll get more into that. But just as a starting point, I was always very heartfelt. I was super sensitive as a kid. I was just an empath. I really connected with others, and like hypersensitive almost to a fault, where I'd feel everyone's pain. And I really was, I'd pick things up. And so that sort of drove a lot of my decision-making without realizing it. I was creative, I was passionate, I was a connector. I was definitely a little sort of rebel heart as a kid. And that kind of evolved into being an entrepreneur. And, being the eldest of four in a pretty big family. And my dad was very much an entrepreneur. So it was take the bull by the horn. So I had this sort of like that mentality, that mindset mixed with a very soft, sensitive heart. So it's sort of this mashup of both. And, that evolved through so many of the different chapters of my life, being an entrepreneur. And even when I was at school, initially I studied communications with a minor in film. And then I was taking like physics, math, and music classes and Spanish, like all kinds of, I was just curious, and I let that curiosity lead me. But the one thread that really sort of wove everything together was, as I reflect now, and as HeartRise was born, was always this listening to something deeper within, right? We hear that the answers live within, and we sort of want to access that. And I was always very curious. So this sort of curious nature drove so much of what I was doing. And it didn't always take me on the right path, but it allowed me to expand. So, got down on so many different entrepreneurial journeys and, many chapters along those in that way. I mean, I had a clothing line, I have marketing and design, lots of different experiences. And I just share that. I could go into more detail, but it's more because each of those has really allowed for what is now HeartRise. So even though at the time, I didn't want to lock in when I was at university, I didn't want to have to choose a lane. I was like, I want to do a little this and a little that. And I was creative, and I loved design, I loved fashion, and all of those things now get to sort of be sprinkled into what I do, which is really beautiful. And it also allows for a greater capacity to understand others. So for anyone watching, I would really encourage to listen to that. There is a pulse, and we're going to get to that. And that's what HeartRise helps to unleash and uncover and plug into. But when you learn to trust that you actually do have the answers within, which is very confrontational for who, busy mind, right? We'll get to that too. I have a lot of names for this guy, but it can get very chaotic uptown. And, I was noticing that there was always this push-pull, these shoulds that would be driving some of the narrative, but there was a deeper calling inside and this sort of creative vision. Initially, I really understood it more as the creative vision in me. I was super creative and I was always drawn by entrepreneurship. I remember having conversations as sort of a big sister, mentor, camp counselor for kiddos. And I just remember being so inspired to have inspiring conversations. When people would have a dream, I'd be like, let's get it going, like, how can we? And I'd love to ideate. And I now call it Heartstorm, but I'd love to Heartstorm with them and vision what that could be. And, just really everything was possible. In fact, I even had, when I got into my clothing line, I had a Picasso quote, "Everything you can imagine is real," that went down my pants, that were, I had all these fun, playful colors. And I used to create the whole color palette and these amazing, just fun pieces. So they were called my jimmies, which was a mix between jammies and like cozy pants, but they were like freestyle. And I had a quote coming down the pen, and just, it was back in the days, like the early days of Juicy Couture, which was, so it was cozy loungewear, which evolved into sweaters and all these different things. But that was also such a creative emancipation. But that said, I was very much drawn along the way to continuously be in the conversation of what was possible, and always inspired by stories. Like I remember as a young kid, the story of like Ben and Jerry's was like one that I was like, wow, how cool. Like just looking at when someone had a story or a passion or a purpose and what drove them. So that sort of entrepreneurial journey, or the hero's journey, was something that really called me. So that was the thread that continued to guide me into what has now become HeartRise as the method and the movement. And at the point when I really decided to shift gears, I had built up this clothing line, which was my own name, which was very confusing, because it was like, wait a minute, it was 2008 at the time. And I felt really overwhelmed by, there was just so much happening in the economy and the rat race industry. And I just I wasn't feeling it anymore. And I didn't, like, all of my favorite creations would be the ones that the buyers wouldn't buy because they weren't safe. So I'd keep all the fun samples, but it just felt very limited. And, we were just constantly producing for profit. And the creative aspect that I love, the design and the working with others, like when we do trade shows, I'd love having, people would come find me at the coterie because of my laugh, and they'd come to our booth and be like, oh, we're safe, because the fashion industry can be a little bit of a hoopla, a little bit of a scene and a lot of masquerading, if you will. So, I was observing all of these threads that were really guiding and inspiring me without realizing it. But that all sort of fed into when I shifted gears in 2008. And I was actually a dear friend of mine who had sent me an article about life coaching at the time, which wasn't as rampant as it is now. And I just say that because it was sort of acknowledging what I was already doing naturally. And I remember reading the article, and it was sort of in the midst of like birthing the next collection and buying the next, you're always in fashion, you're always working a season ahead on design, or 2 seasons ahead on design and 1 season ahead on production. So it's really hard to like exit stage left. But I just remember feeling so lit when I read this, and I thought, wow, imagine if that could be a career. Like, imagine if like I could do what I love and just be continuously sort of birthing and empowering and encouraging people to tune into their path, their purpose, their truth. So that sort of, it stirred something in me. And when I decided in 2008 to shift gears, and I went and did a program, and it wasn't even per se the program. In fact, I don't even think the school is around anymore, but it was more that I gave myself, and this is important because sometimes we get so caught up in the credentials, but it's more the permission that we give ourselves. And I really had said, you know what? Yes, I want to follow this path. And I started to get into what now is the early stages of HeartRise, which was sort of really the thread all along. And then I can get to the heart piece. But what I noticed was when I got into the coaching, as I began, and it was so interesting because my first client was actually someone I met on a plane, who I'm that person who in the grocery line is making friends, and on the plane is, I love to connect. I mean, the first moment we connected, and shout out to Sheila, who's another beautiful heart and soul and connector. She knew it was going to be a natural connect, but I just love to connect. And so I'll keep his name out, but he was amazing. And he was this beautiful, kind, older gay man who by the end of the flight was like crying in my lap. I kid you not. And I was like, okay, this is on. And so I had the courage to ask him if he'd be willing to, try on a client session. I think I might have even offered free. And then I worked into starting to charge and built it out from there. And it's funny, the first few clients I had were actually men, because they felt safe and seen, and held in a way. And that's the essence of any really powerful coaching, in my experience, where, we feel like we can express who we are and come home to who we are. So anyhow, the coaching gave way to growing that, doing a lot of work with groups. And I will say that the heart came in as a really key piece when I realized that so much of where people got stuck or blocked was here. So I'll leave it there. I could say so much more. And now we're bringing it in so many ways and places and spaces, from the corporate world to schools to, but I can continue. I just feel like I'm giving a lot of background here.
No, I appreciate it, because the story is powerful, because I believe when we're children, we have that spark that we're using our imagination fully, our creativity, and we're operating from that space. And then as we get older, it kind of fades and fades and fades. And then, like you said, there's a larger blockage, and we can't seem to access that creative spirit anymore. Mm. Right. And you stuck with it. You were creating, you were doing design work, and you're also remaining open to what fulfilled you more. And when that opportunity was there, mustering the courage to go for it. That's a powerful story, because people are stuck. Right. People they aren't fulfilling their creative spirit, which humans are creative by nature, I believe. And that blocks their lives from being truly fulfilled. So that is you're just an example of what is possible when someone is operating from that space, being open to what opportunities come about. And
I love that. I love that so much. And the fear piece, I think what you addressed there, I think is really important also, because that was partly where the blockages were just apparent, even in my own life, or with some of the naysayers, or people who, when I first started my clothing line, for example, it was like, oh, good luck with that. Not that they didn't have confidence. And it was just a few people, but that would say, I was from Montreal at the time, and, there's big brands out of, Europe and LA and New York. And, the chances of starting a line successfully are slim to none, if you go in that mindset of limiting beliefs and fear and let that drive the bus. But I leaned in, and I did some, it was Jessie May Come Out and Play. And I created a really colorful collection, and the butterfly was born, and I had all my girlfriends modeling the collections, and we'd do these really fun shoots. And it was just a very original, heart spirited, creative visionary sort of brand. But just to lean into, that the courage, and the root of courage is cœur en français, or core in Latin, which is heart. And, I don't believe anyone is fearless. I believe we all have fear, but it's how we lean in and move through it that guides and supports us. So that's pivotal. Yeah,
absolutely. I agree. It's not the absence of fear, it's navigating through it that courage is. And with that, I want to ask, for someone who might not have the context, when I say from that space, or operating from the heart, vice operating from the mind, yes, what does it mean to live and be from the heart? Because for a lot of people, it's just a muscle that pumps blood out the body, right?
Such a good question. And it is so important to identify, because it's very true that we've been taught to think of the heart as exactly that, just the physiological heart, and just the sort of operating system in a sense. But actually, when I describe heart, we're talking about this intelligent wisdom that is one that connects and plugs us in and gives us access to so much more. So on the science side, there's an electromagnetic field energy, which is why when you meet someone, they're putting out a signal, right? We do workshops for Gen Z and youth called The Vibes Don't Lie. And we know that's true, especially and even through tech. I mean, you meet someone in person and it's a lot easier to pick up those cues, but even through voice, we've been doing a lot on Clubhouse and I love it because it's just, there's no BSing on Clubhouse because you feel the vibes. You either feel someone's energy or you're like, that person's full of it. It doesn't feel true or authentic. So learning to attune to that vibrational wisdom, which is heart power, as I call it, and that grounding within is key. And the piece around it that's important to understand, and I'll differentiate further in a moment, is one of the reasons most of us have not really been taught nor experienced the fullness of our heart is that fear we describe, but the fear of feeling, which sounds crazy, but we've only really been taught to revere or appreciate the kind of happy, positive feelings, right? Or the ones that are kind of publicly okay to show, right? The ones that, whereas things like fear, anxiety, loneliness, sad, all these things that we all deal with, it's like, oh no, we put on a face, I'm fine, I've got this. Newsflash, nobody's got this. Clearly, look at what just happened and what we're going through. And we're all just doing the best we can. But the beauty is the power of the heart can restore us and remind us who we are and connect us with each other by letting ourselves feel. So to contextualize further, the thought of opening the heart is like, shoot me now for most people. Like, I don't want to open my heart. I got this. I'm tough, especially for men. And we do a lot of work with men. And we've talked about this. We're going to be doing more too, which I'm excited about. But it's really important. And, I will give real context because I was asked initially, the reason that I started working with men is there was a woman who ran a men in recovery group who invited me to share and to start doing HeartRise sessions with a men's group. And it wasn't, necessarily like some Malibu shishi environment. It was definitely like an intense, rough and sort of the kind of environment where I maybe wouldn't have felt safe if I was in my head. Right. And I just thought, you know what, there's a bigger request here. It felt like there was a calling to do that work. And I worked with this group for 3 years. It was the most powerful experience to date, one of the most that I've had. And just witnessing the experience of letting people feel held and allowing them to just feel their feelings. Like, it sounds so simple, and yet most of us haven't felt safe enough to do that. And so the heart plays such an integral role to unleash a lot of that feeling wisdom. By feeling through, you can heal through and move that stuck energy so that you're not relying on the busy mind, which is the automated limiting beliefs, which is what runs the show for most people. So it's not about, and it's often described as ego mind. So I don't preach to not embrace the ego, because we all have an ego. We all have programming. We all have things that we've picked up along the way, but it's that the head and the heart can work together. So when you start to really befriend the heart and learn to tune in and access some of those feelings, and the method itself helps to do that. That's really what it uncovers. It helps us to start feeling safe enough to feel what's coming up so that we can release it and move through and unleash that creative vision and that power and that purpose and that ease and that compassion and all the beautiful things that the heart is here to share within each of us. We all have our own signature song. So there is this powerful intelligence that is available to us when we plug in. And it's about getting the head to cooperate. So I like to say it's getting the head to bow to the heart's wisdom, which is super confrontational for who. It's like, nah, I'm going to keep it all stuffed down. And that, this emotional constipation, we're blocking so much and we're pretending like we've got it all together. And it's actually the most dangerous thing that we could be doing, because it's isolating. It's uncomfortable. It actually causes physical illness if we're not mindful and heartful, as I like to say, about what we're experiencing. And the beauty is, the more we come home to our heart and witness each other in that way, we recognize, as I like to say, we all know each other by heart. And we're like, wow, he's feeling it too, or she's feeling it too. Oh, I can exhale. So to open the heart, even though we've been taught to think of that as unsafe, the more we practice it, the more resilience we build, the stronger we are, and the more our brilliant mind can serve that power source.
You said just a lot of beautiful things. And when I learned that the heart has its own frequency, it radiates a literal energy, and scientists figured this out. And when I saw that the brain and the heart can be operating on different wavelengths and they can measure it,
yes,
like literally measure it, it blew my mind, because that's when I was just like, this is very powerful. And then I started realizing, when we do feel energy of other people, when we are feeding off vibrations, we sense that. You know, animals sense it, of course, like, especially. I was just talking to my dog trainer the other day, like how sensitive dogs are to that, because they operate from that space all the time. Like, that's just how animals are. But we are animals also, and we have that capability to sense. And it's just so powerful. And that kind of leads to my next question of going from head to heart,
right.
because that's, for a lot of people, it is scary. And like you said, it's going to take practice, and I'm still practicing it, like, every day. I'm in my head, and I'm just trying to remind myself, go to heart, head to heart. A good friend of mine told me just head to heart is a good, quick way to remind yourself to say head to heart.
And hand on heart helps too, just by the way. If you notice when we're really moved or we're in our heart, we just do that by instinct. So just as a simple extra little prompt, that helps, but head to heart is right on.
That is true. I did remember, I think it was Tony Robbins that mentioned it. When you put your hand on your heart, within like a minute or two, your frequencies are aligned from your brain to your heart.
The state you cultivate is coherence. And if you breathe with your heart, it's called heart focused breathing, because I did train with Heart Math, which is a science-based research institute. So I have a lot of the science in the treasure trove too. And it's amazing, like you described, to recognize that. But it's that simple. Just initially, I mean, and you may find, for anyone who practices it, if you are holding a lot inside and you haven't really connected at first, it can feel very uncomfortable, but with practice, it gets so much easier. And it's just like power source. It's your engine.
And that is a habit, to practice getting attuned to that, which is one of the things I'm very appreciative for the work you do, because you do a daily meditation that you send out through text. And that is, I think that's how we start, by something like that. And if you're listening to this, check out the Instagram HeartRise Movement and text her community, because that daily, I just thank you for the work you put into that, because that's not easy to maintain. But that, I think, is the starting point, because that brings awareness, that gets you in a meditative space, the breathing, understanding, and then the repetition, keep doing it every morning. And then I believe there's going to be a lot of shifts that happen internally. So
it's a rhythm. It's percussive. That's why. So for anyone musical or not, I mean, you said we're all creative. I think we're all musical by nature too. There is this, vibration, right? Which is why sound current is so powerful. Sound baths have become so, there's a reason for that. And the oceanic nature of going into a spa, there's a reason that whole sort of ocean energy is present. So with practice, you can sense it. And actually, as part of the method, the fourth step is flow. With Heart Wisdom, I flow. So you can tell with practice if you're tense and really like reactive and not in flow. And it's a perfect way to just sort of cue back up to, okay, I want to come back home to my heart. And just with breath and with practice, there is this vibrational memory too. So the beauty is, with practice, you can just check back in, and just by hearing a voice that gives that kind of ease, or being in a certain environment, so, there's things that we can do, and just hand on heart is one of the best ones to cue it back up. It just brings you right back into that rhythm.
And that's just such an effective way, because I'm going to start practicing, because if you notice, if you have the awareness to notice you're operating from your head, and just putting your hand on your heart and just focusing your attention there you go. You're shifting your attention from whatever you're lost in the sauce in your brain to your heart. So
and the breath is key too. You want to breathe.
Right.
Yeah. Together.
So tell us a little bit about that, because
Yeah.
Not only do you have like one of the most soothing voices when you do a meditation,
Mhm.
but
Thank
tell
you.
us a little bit about how we can, how the breath is so important in
Yeah.
aligning ourselves to our heart.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's if you think of sort of this like heart power or this heartbeat as your rhythm, you want to give oxygen to it. You want to breathe so
Mhm.
that you wake it back up, right? If you're kind of holding and you're tense and there's no breath coming in, that's when it's quite literally a sense of like we feel it. You feel really tense. And so the breath just really helps to unleash, and at first, especially with hand on heart, if you have a lot of tension and you're holding a lot and you're really busy uptown, then it can be initially a little bit challenging. But I will say again, with practice, working with breath just helps to ease you into heart. And with listening to something, the combination of a guided practice, and thank you for those Ignite Bites are really
Mhm.
beautiful way to start your day. And they're just an easy, 4 or 5 minutes for the not super seasoned meditator or the seasoned meditator alike. HeartRise plays well with others. We have a lot of people that have other practices that love to integrate because the heart really is the bridge. And with that, the breath gives way to open things up and to really bring you back home. And it also is restorative. So there's so many elements to the breath that really give way to that heartful connection, but it also cultivates that coherence between head and heart. So with breath and with voice and with presence, and you start to connect in, even as a practice to see if you can feel for your heartbeat, to just breathe and give attention to heartbeat and feel that can really be a beautiful way to begin the day. I'm a big advocate for starting the day heart first.
Absolutely. And because it's so, it's only 4 or 5 minutes, you can invest 4 or 5 minutes in yourself before the day starts, right? Set the tone, because that really does determine the quality of the rest of your day. I feel is the way, and I'm guilty of it all the time, just jumping into everything through anxiety. I'm just, oh, I got so much to do today. I gotta start right now, and then just like then I see your text message come in, and I'm like, all right, I'll do it.
Mhm. Oh, that makes
So
me so happy to know.
it is,
That would, yeah.
yeah, it's just a powerful, powerful way to start. Right, you don't
Mm,
have to sit there and meditate for 1 hour to be in a meditative space, especially if you haven't meditated. That's practice. That's literally a practice. You have to build that muscle,
yeah.
just like anyone would if they're lifting weights or whatever. It's the more of the emotional muscle,
Yeah.
the spiritual muscle,
Yes.
and it just bleeds into everything.
Yeah, it really does. And people do notice a shift. That excites me so much working with others where I'll, whether it's in a corporate context, I'll have, after a workshop or an experience, people who've worked together 5 years and then suddenly they feel so much more connected with each other after connecting to their heart. It's so beautiful what that can bring. And similarly, I'll have people who will say, oh, wow, my partner or my, a family
Mhm.
member or best friend is really not like they're noticing something's going on, or as I love to say, your radiance is contagious, but once ignited and plugged in and powered up, you can really sense it. And it doesn't mean that everything is peaches and lollipops all the time, but that you have a practice. And this is an actual method. So the 4 steps, once you learn it, and there are ways to learn it for anyone who wants to go deeper into the practice, but once you understand the 4 steps and you can really practice it like any kind of training, you can really retrain your brain with the power of your heart. And then it's like, watch out.
And that's where the rewiring really
That's
happens, because it's very subconscious how we're operating, and it's so unnatural to be in an anxious state, in a
right.
stressful state for extended periods of time, which I was for a long time. And
Mm,
I know how it was affecting my health personally. And I'm a healthy guy, and it was really affecting my health. And I'm learning more about the body and then what stress does to the body
mm,
with adrenaline and cortisol. And
mm,
there is a serious cost to operating that way.
mm,
And even not just the peace of mind, but your physical health. Your life is being shortened if you're operating in stress all the time. And I was noticing that path. That was one of the reasons I got out of the military. But now it's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about helping those who are still in.
mm.
because
I love that so much. And I want to just add, because it's so potent, mind, body, spirit, even for those wellness minded or not, is often the way that wellness is described. And so people will tap in and the heart kind of gets left out, or it gets tucked into one of those buckets. And it's not really revered as this intelligent source. And it really is. And as it comes to, even when in the corporate world, when we describe, for example, emotional intelligence training, is often, that's some of the terminology we use when we're working in that space. And while it's definitely getting traction, especially during the pandemic, it's been high demand now because everyone realizes we need some emotional, sort of emotionally intelligent leadership. But that said, it's how to, these softer skills that we haven't really been taught to respect or revere, that can really be the epicenter for all those other things. So, we tend to think of like the physical working out and like a lot of these other, or eating well. And, we've got the sort of wellness game down in those ways, but, and some of us, maybe not everyone, but we're in that, we've at least gotten quite far along that path. But the heart piece is still it really needs to catch up. And it's such an important, it's kind of the epicenter. So I'm excited to see that there has been a lot more traction and, just the responsiveness and people really recognizing that, wow, it's okay to just, be fully who I am, and to acknowledge, because that's where the block happens. It's that we've got this sort of perfection game and this sort of like having to hold up, all of these identities and these roles. And it's, this big masquerade. And it's ironic now with all the masks. And I often in the book and in our practice, we talk about the masquerade, but that whole idea of like, pretending everything's okay when it's not. But the more real we can get, even in the workplace, even in school, even with our friends and our family and those we love, it's okay to say, I'm hurting or I need help, because we all are, myself included. It's not, most of the time it can be challenging, but it's where we're coming from inside that can really shift the course of how we roll. And it's amazing what it can do when we open up to recognize that and the connectedness that happens. And we need each other right now more than ever. So it is an exciting time to be alive for that reason. I feel that there's really a lot of opportunity for us to remember who we are. There's a real remembering that comes with the heart, because the beauty is each of us know we have that wisdom inherent, and that's part of the practice. It's not that I have the answers for you or for anyone. Each of you has your own best wisdom. It's about returning to it.
And we have that. We're born with it.
Yes.
Because you don't see a kid getting discouraged, when they fall down, when they can't walk. They get right back up. And then as soon as we fell once in our dream, we just say, all right, I'm gonna just go stick to the job that I hate and like live a miserable life. We have that. We just got to tap into that, our essence of who we were when we were, before we got conditioned otherwise, I believe.
That's right. Being who you are, though, that piece of like, we're born this way, and it's our inherent nature, and we get sort of programmed out of it. And it's very much the busy mind that does that. But the beauty is you can come back home to your heart just as readily with commitment, and you can build that strength.
Yes, through repetition.
Yes.
It is all possible. And I forgot to mention your book in the beginning of this. Can you tell us about that? Because I know you put a lot of heart into that. Could you tell us about that?
I did. And this, as you see, even the shape of it. So this is High on Heart, the HeartRise Method in a book. And it's really, it's got like a lot of, just it's a visual sort of odyssey, if you will. And it's the method in a book. I wrote it. It just literally flowed right out of me because I had been teaching and facilitating the practice for years. So when I went to write it, it was literally like a month or less when I wrote it. Then I took a month or so and I worked with someone who helped me edit, who was amazing. And then I took where we just mapped things out, but it was all there. It was just sort of like a little bit of restructuring. And then I worked on the design, which also took another month. And so it was like 3 months, and I creatively got to lay it out and do the creative on it, which was really fun because, again, as I mentioned at the top, having all these different pieces of my journey that have all fed into what is now HeartRise. So the book is the method, but it's also the kind of thing that you can use as an oracle. Like you could, a card you can just pull, like, let's do one right now. I'm just going to flip it open. Yeah. Let's see what we got. How's that?
I'll do it.
Okay. Wow. What did I just say
No.
about masquerade? Is that wild? I call those heart winks. That is so wild. Wow. Okay, so let's dive in a little further. It's literally what we were just saying. This is the power of the heart, you all, and there's so much
Tune
in
in.
here. As sweet young babes, we come into the world so full of feelings, ready to express, learn, and emote. Yet the moment we're old enough, it's literally what you just said. If anyone is questioning the power of the heart, check this. This is literally what you just said. And that's what happens. You get these winks, as I call them, heart winks, signs. Yet the moment we're old enough, we're taught to categorize, control, and contain our feelings, to judge them, to edit them, to behave, whatever that means anymore or ever really. Children should be seen and not heard. We're taught by those we revere to put a brave face on it, to smile through the pain, to toughen up, all of which reek of the detrimental programming we're taught to live by and adhere to. Shutting down our feelings in order to function, putting a mask on it. This is Danger Bay, and sadly, where most of us live. We are conditioned to repress, to suppress, to contract, and to blend in, to dim our light so that we fit. How painful, how uncomfortable. Striving to be accepted, we keep to our lane, confined by the checklist of how to be and be seen. We learn to pretend. We practice being normal, boring, safe, impersonal, inauthentic. So that's just a context one. I want to give a little bit of a lift because that gives some story like around why we need this. But I want to give a little bit of a higher frequency read. Okay, I'm going to do one more. Okay, but that was so on point. Okay, this is another page. Feel it all. And at the end of each section, there's a little kind of recap and the steps are broke. So the 4 steps are mapped out. But again, it's a fun journey. You can read it in one go, or you can pop open like we just did and get exactly what you need. Feel it all. Every time we hold back what we're feeling, we build another layer around our heart. The blessing is, in the same way, we can also learn to open our hearts one feeling at a time. One honest expression at a time, telling the truth instead of what we think someone wants to hear. As we honor the real voice beyond the mask with gentle care, the vibration of our heart shares the song of our soul. And in this raw, tender, powerful space, we get to recognize each other again.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And it's so important to have, I think, visual triggers. So not only is the book just visually beautiful, and the way it's designed, it's different than a traditional book. And the creative aspect, the visuals in it, I think it's important for people to have. That's part of rewiring. You start those habits, like the 5 minutes of conscious breathing and feeling. Maybe read a page of something like that can reset your mind from thinking wherever your mind's at, could bring you back to something intentional. And those triggers and those habits, doing it repetitively, that begins to make new associations in your brain. So you're not operating in that previous state constantly and chronically, like I was when I was in the military, and I was affecting my health and a lot of other issues that came out of that. So thank you for that. I'll link all that, the book and everything, and the podcast High on Heart. So we have to consciously program our minds. I truly believe this, because if you're not, you're susceptible to the 5,000 advertisements you see in the social media and everyone else's agenda and everyone else's whatever reason they want you to pay attention to them, usually for some sort of profit, back to who you are and living a life that's wholehearted and living fully and loving authentically. So I want to before we wrap this up, where is the best place to reach Miss Jessie May Wolfe?
Yeah. Well, I love that you brought up Ignite Bites. Those are a really fun way to stay connected. And actually, I really do take the time to connect directly. So it's a text that you receive every morning. You can text us. And essentially you get a little morning mini HeartRise meditation. This morning was all about patience. Each day there's a different theme, and they're on a monthly cycle. So it's always, it's wild that the people that have been practicing since we launched them, and I put them out right around the election. So it was very well received. And those that have been practicing since then have shared with me, much like with the book, they'll say, wow, that one hit me today exactly when I needed it. So it's wild and beautiful the way when you hear something or send something or pick up on something, if you catch it in a different moment, it has a new context. So that's a really beautiful way to just have a daily practice and to stay directly connected. And we can share the number, and I can say it now, but that's an easy way to just get a free mini daily meditation. And they're HeartRise based. So they're really all about the heart medicine. And then there's so many other, we do a monthly Tribe Connect. Actually, I want to have you join the next one. They're so amazing. They're on the full moon, and they're just a powerful gathering of community that come together virtually. I was doing them pre-pandemic, but during the pandemic, they really escalated and become this kind of like amazing space that our community come together. And it's just such a beautiful heart-based community that come and feel seen and feel safe and feel held. And, I lead the session and then I do a guided practice, but there's sharing and there's community building, and you get to know beautiful hearts from all over. So that's also a really beautiful way. That's on the site. So HeartRiseMovement.com. I'm also bringing this into, and I have leaders who we did 2 leadership trainings through the pandemic. So, which is wild when I think back to consider, but so there are more people now who are teaching and facilitating the method. So they're running ignition programs and ongoing practice so that people can tune in from anywhere. And we do bring this into companies, schools, organizations, creative culture, and communities. And as things open back up, I do a lot of speaking and activations and live sessions, everything from, I did an event with free people at the Ace Hotel for Coachella to I did a summit for suicide prevention, so the range is far and wide, and my heart is super committed. So if you have a project or a vision, something that you want support with, bring it on. I'm here to support however I best can.
One last thing I want to mention is that you just reminded me of it. It's very, very much about the community and the support system that you have, because everyone faces issues, and when we're facing them alone, that becomes overwhelming, and we're not supposed to operate alone. We're so connected that it's crazy. And for people to want to go through very serious problems and issues and keep it all reserved, they will continue to struggle until they get some support, because it's very hard to make those breakthroughs alone. And that's why what you do is so important. That's why it's important for suicide prevention. I'm glad you do work for that, and you're getting out there in more organizations, because so much more people need to tap into their heart. So thank you for all the work you do.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. And I want to just add to that community piece. We have such a cross section of people from, men, women, old, young. It's funny because all the marketing we haven't done a lot, and we're starting to work with a team. And I jokingly say, like, I was the lead magnet, I am the sales funnel. Like, we don't have any of that stuff, which we're starting to get more dialed on. But it's funny because, I used to do a lot of in-person events, and people would literally come for the hugs, more than that, but to connect and to feel seen and loved and held, and to remember that we belong to each other, because we do, and we need each other, myself included. I get so much from the sessions, and as well, and we have so many, like I said, all walks of life, cultures, backgrounds, ages. Everybody is welcome in our community, and we do need that. So I feel just called to share that. And the last thing I will mention is we just dropped, it's going out next week, but by the time this is live, a very special From Overwhelm to Ease meditation that's 8 or 9 minutes. So for someone that just wants to practice on the daily, it takes you through the method through 2 cycles. So it's really good to just plug into, especially now as everything is shifting. And, there's a lot of, like you said, there's noise out there that can be, overwhelming. So it just brings you back into ease, and it's going to be available. So we can put that in the link. It's a free meditation that I created for everyone. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for tuning in. If you're listening, give your heart some love. You didn't have to earn it, and it keeps you alive. So put some attention to it and give it the love it needs. Thank you, Jessie May, for joining me today. The greatest gift someone can give is their self. and their time, and you did that here today. So I must thank you very much from the bottom of my heart.
I am so grateful for you and the beautiful heart you are. And thank you for having me, and to everyone tuning in. I really appreciate you. I see you. You're so loved. And I'm just honored to be here. Thank you, love.
Thank you. That is all for this episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you found any value in this episode, someone you know will also. Please share, subscribe, leave a rating and review so we can reach more people, have a farther ripple, and a larger impact. Stay grateful. I appreciate you. And remember, you are a conqueror.